U.S. President Trump stated that 3 hostages have been killed in the Gaza Strip in the last weeks, leaving only 21 live hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli government has approved plans for a massive expansion of its activity in the Gaza Strip. Details of the operation are slowly becoming public. Meanwhile, the United States has announced reaching an agreement with the Houthis in Yemen a day after a Houthi missile hit Israel's airport. The group has vowed to continue hitting Israeli targets. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. On Tuesday, May 6th, U.S. President Trump was speaking during the official nomination of Steve Witkoff as the special U.S. envoy to the Middle East. Relating to the hostage situation in the Gaza Strip, Trump stated that while there were 24 live hostages in Gaza, 3 of them have recently been killed, leaving only 21 live hostages in the Gaza Strip held by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Trump did not give any details about the identity of the hostages who have been killed, and no one else has related to this, so I'm going to try to make some sense out of what we know, who has said what, and what is the possible identity of those hostages who have been killed. In total, there are 59 hostages, living and dead, still held in the Gaza Strip. Hamas has not given information about the condition of the hostages. However, Israeli intelligence has previously determined that 35 of the hostages are confirmed dead, leaving 24 of them who are, at least officially, alive. While that has been the official number for over 2 months of ongoing negotiations, recently there were several rumors that surfaced within Israel, specifically when Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was speaking last week and stated that up to 24 hostages are alive, and his wife was caught on camera as she leaned over and whispered to him, "No, the number is less." Trump's statements today appear to now confirm that Israeli and U.S. intelligence have information about at least 3 hostages who may have been killed in the Gaza Strip in recent weeks. However, again, no one is still stating who they might be. So with regards to the possible identity of those hostages, I will say that Hamas gave indication about the possible death of at least 2 hostages over the last several weeks. On April 15th, Hamas stated that the site where Idan Alexander, that is the last hostage with U.S. citizenship, the site where he was held was hit by an IDF airstrike. 4 days later, on April 19th, the Al-Qassam brigades announced that they have now recovered the body of the guard who was holding Alexander, and added that the group now has no knowledge about Alexander's fate. That is the last time that the group related to Idan Alexander. 2 weeks later, on May 3rd, Hamas published a hostage video showing the hostage Maxim Harkin, where Harkin is seen bandaged and bloodied and states that he was in a tunnel that was recently bombed by the IDF and that he was recovered from there by the Al-Qassam brigades. Harkin was previously seen in a hostage video held alongside another hostage, Bar Burstein, and in the May 3rd video he is seen as saying Bar is still inside when he is found in the bombed-out tunnel by the Al-Qassam brigades, and later in the video he also states that he doesn't know what happened to Burstein and what is his fate. Now, again, I emphasize there's no official statement by Hamas or Israel about the fate of those 2 hostages, nor have I actually seen any rumors circulating about the possible identity of the 3 hostages that Trump was referring to. The only reference given by Hamas has been the statement about Idan Alexander and the hostage video that references Bar Burstein, so I very, very hesitantly say that it is possible that those 2 account for 2 out of the 3 hostages that Trump is referring to, although again I emphasize that's speculation on my part. All I'm saying is that is the only reference that anyone has given to the possible death of hostages over the last several weeks. Relating to the hostage negotiations, also on May 6th, Al Arabi Al Jadid quoted Egyptian sources stating that the United States has put forward a new proposal for the release of several hostages, specifically timing the deal to be prior to the visit of U.S. President Trump to the Middle East that's going to happen next week. The report gave no information about this deal, however, and Israeli sources later stated that they have no knowledge about this proposal. Hamas also stated that it is not prepared to continue negotiating while the fighting still continues. As it stands right now, the sides are at a complete stalemate in the hostage negotiations. Israel is insisting on a limited deal that will secure the release of about half of the hostages in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners, and a temporary ceasefire that will allow the country to then return to fighting Hamas. In turn, Hamas is insisting on a deal that will include the release of all hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, but also a complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and a complete end to the war. As things stand right now, they are at a complete stalemate. Amidst this stalemate, on May 4th, the Israeli government approved new operational plans for the Israeli military. focusing on a massive expansion of the IDF's activity in the Gaza Strip. The plan, which has been codenamed in Israel Gideon's Chariots, consists of 3 broad phases and includes a gradual increase of the Israeli military's hold on territory in the Gaza Strip, the mass mobilization and movement of Palestinians towards the southern parts of the Strip, focused and tightly regulated distribution of humanitarian aid in southern Gaza, and the idea of establishing permanent positions in the territories it takes over in order to both dismantle Hamas's activity and also to stop the group from rebuilding in those areas. There have been several substantial leaks about the contents of the plan, and the Israeli government is also being very explicit about the fact that it wants to make the plans public in order to, quote-unquote, scare Hamas into agreeing to the temporary ceasefire under Israel's conditions. So in other words, while these are unsubstantiated leaks about the plan, the government also said that it wants Hamas to know what are the plans in order to try to scare it into agreeing to Israel's temporary ceasefire rather than facing these military plans. So breaking down the different phases of this operation, Gideon's Chariots, according to what has been published, Phase 1 has de facto already begun from the moment that the plan was approved, and this phase focuses on logistical planning and assembly of the Israeli military. Israel has made public that it does not want to initiate the plan before the conclusion of U.S. President Trump's visit to the Middle East on May 16th, with some hopes being raised that maybe Trump's visit to Qatar will also lead to advances in the hostage deal. Possibly Qatar will want to announce while Trump is there that they managed to pressure Hamas into a deal. In other words, Israel is saying it's not going to initiate the plan, it's going to focus on the logistical phases during the next 10 days, again trying to entice Qatar to maybe pressure Hamas into agreeing to this temporary ceasefire while U.S. President Trump is visiting the area. In light of this stalling, this phase of logistical planning is expected to take at least 10 days, although in Israel they emphasized that they're not saying exactly when the operation is going to move forward, and it involves 2 main things. First, there will be a massive draft of IDF reserve soldiers, according to some reports at least 60,000, some say more, with a focus on their training and their preparation to take over different positions, either in the Gaza Strip or in other areas in order to relieve other soldiers to turn their attention to Gaza. Alongside this, already underway is a major plan to prepare the logistical sites in southern Gaza, laying the foundation for the absorption of up to 2 million Palestinians who will be diverted there from the northern and central parts of the Gaza Strip. According to reports, the Israeli military is preparing specific demarcated areas in Rafah between the Morag and Philadelphia corridors. So in the Gaza Strip, that means in this area between a corridor the IDF has developed here and the Philadelphia corridor over here. So it's a fifth of the Gaza Strip, and it's an area that has largely been evacuated from Palestinians already, and the IDF is in control of, all in the southern parts of Gaza. According to reports, this operation has included major quote-unquote flattening operations, i.e. demolishing entire neighborhoods, and declaring sites as sterile of Hamas activity, all in order to prepare this as a massive humanitarian zone that can absorb the Palestinians from the other parts of the Gaza Strip. During this phase, it is reported the blockade of all humanitarian aid into Gaza is going to continue, and it will continue until the implementation of the second phase of this operation, Gideon's Chariots. The second phase of the operation will also be a combined phase. One aspect of it relates to major bombings and airstrikes that will target Hamas's targets. However, the much larger facet relates to the mobilization of the Palestinian population from the entire northern and possibly central parts of the Gaza Strip towards the southern parts of the Strip, again towards this area in Rafah over here. During this phase, the population will be called upon to move south to the areas of Rafah between the Morag and Philadelphia corridors, and specific crossing points will be designated along the Morag corridor. The IDF reported that these will include technological means that are aimed at stopping Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives from entering the area. A main facet of this phase is also the establishment of aid distribution mechanisms that will be limited to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip. Sources in the Israeli government confirmed that the limiting of aid to southern Gaza is in part meant to draw Palestinians to evacuate the rest of the Gaza Strip and move southward to the designated humanitarian zones, and that the other part of the logic is to establish a mechanism that stops Hamas from taking over the aid, as has been the case in the past. In the past, trucks would go to main distribution centers in the heart of Gaza City or Deir el-Balah, and very often Hamas would take it over. Here, the IDF is saying that the logic is there will be centralized aid distribution areas in southern Gaza, such that Palestinian civilians have to come to them, and Hamas will not be able to take over those aid trucks. According to what has been reported, in the designated humanitarian zone in Rafah, 3 logistical centers will be set up, and while the aid itself, which includes food, water, medical supplies, and other facets also, will be distributed by both private NGOs and the United States companies, the zones themselves are going to be under IDF protection, again with the aim of stopping Hamas from taking over the aid. The main difference between the previous method of aid distribution up until now in the war and the current plan is that, unlike the previous schemes, this distribution will be done on a per-family basis of Palestinian families, with one family member being allowed to arrive and receive aid packages for the entire family on a weekly basis. It was reported that the security establishment in Israel has calculated that the average Gazan family requires roughly 70 kilos of food per week, and that the aim is to provide only that amount in order to, on the one hand, avoid a situation of hunger among the population, while on the other hand, not have a surplus of aid such that Hamas cannot take it over. Other facets of the aid distribution plan include the registration of families in the aid distribution centers, as well as other logistical aspects. However, I will say these are more technical, and I'll report more about them if this plan is actually implemented. What I will add here is that an additional factor that was attributed by several sources in the Israeli government states that in addition to removing Palestinian civilians out of the fighting areas and pressuring Hamas with the control of the humanitarian aid, a main interest that Israel has in mobilizing the Palestinian population southward is to move the vast amount of people closer to the border crossings with Egypt, Israel, as well as to the sea, in order to facilitate the quote-unquote willful emigration of Palestinians that will follow Trump's plan and vision of Palestinians all emigrating from the Middle East. I remind everyone that Israel has, according to reports, tasked the Mossad to be in touch with several different countries in order to possibly absorb a lot of Palestinians. Again, that part was more rumored. It was not the official declarations of the IDF's plan. However, enough sources stated that that is part of the considerations that I'm adding it here. After Phase 1, which is the logistical considerations, and Phase 2, the mass mobilization of the Palestinian population, in Phase 3, major IDF forces will move into the different areas of the Gaza Strip, with the aim of taking up permanent positions and breaking apart Hamas's battalions, forcing them to fight more individually. The plan includes major flattening operations of structures that have been used by Hamas throughout Gaza City and Deir al-Balah, presumably, with the aim of disbanding the Al-Qassam Brigade's ability to coordinate their activities. This phase is supposed to be gradual. According to reports, it will take several months, again with the aim of constantly increasing pressure on Hamas. Before moving on from this plan to the next thing I'm going to focus on, there are 2 more things I'm going to say with relation to the approvals of this plan. The first is that a major source of concern has been raised by the family members of hostages in Israel with regards to this military expansion, particularly after it was leaked that the IDF Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, raised concerns with the Israeli government, stating that the expansion of the military operations is going to de facto endanger the hostages no matter where they are held, and he specifically raised concern that if the IDF moves into an area where hostages are held, possibly the Al-Qassam brigades that are guarding them will simply flee, leaving the hostages to starve wherever they are held. That is something that is causing a big stir-up within Israel. A second thing I'm going to say is that while these plans have already been approved by the Israeli government and logistical planning is underway, Israel is also being very public about the fact that it is giving Hamas quote-unquote exit routes in order to avoid this plan's implementation, with Israeli sources repeatedly expressing a hope that Hamas will choose to be more flexible and accept the temporary truce that Israel favors as a way to avoid the implementation of these plans. According to reports, these quote-unquote exit routes are supposed to be between the phases that Israel plans to implement, and again, that is one of the reasons that, again, according to reports, Israel is being very public about what the plans are, trying to pressure Hamas into doing anything it can in order to avoid the implementation of this operation. Before I conclude this video, I'm going to relate to an arena that I've reported less about lately, which is the Houthi arena in Yemen. As a reminder, throughout the war, the Houthis have been very involved in firing on ships suspected to have an Israeli affiliation in the Red Sea, and over the past year they have also begun firing drones and missiles at Israel directly. Since the breakdown of the ceasefire on March 18th, the Houthis launched several dozen drones and 27 ballistic missiles towards Israel. The vast majority of these were intercepted outside of Israeli airspace. The United States has also substantially increased its attacks on the Houthis in recent months, and has also requested that Israel not retaliate to the missiles and instead leave that arena to the United States. Two major developments occurred, however, in the last 2 days, which are going to pretty drastically affect this equation, and remains to be seen how it's going to unfold. On May 4th, Israeli and U.S. interceptors misfired and missed a Houthi ballistic missile that was launched towards Israel, and that missile managed to hit the outskirts of Israel's international airport. 4 people were reportedly injured in that incident, and the missile caused a massive crater, according to reports several dozen meters deep and wide. This caused a cascade of international airlines to cancel their services to Israel, and the Houthis then capitalized on this success, and within hours the Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria stated that the movement is now going to focus their attacks on shutting down international air travel to Israel, and called upon all international airlines to factor this in when planning their business. In retaliation to that missile, on May 5th and May 6th, Israel carried out 2 major bombing campaigns against Houthi targets in Yemen. 48 airstrikes were reported in the port of Hodeidah on May 5th, causing major damage to the port, and a major attack targeting the Houthis' main airport in Sana'a was also carried out on May 6th, reportedly destroying the airport. The Israeli military issued warnings to civilians in Yemen prior to the airport attack, and in addition to those strikes, there were also attacks that were carried out against 2 cement and concrete factories in Hodeidah and Sana'a. According to reports in Yemen, 7 people were killed in those various different attacks, and over 40 were injured. Amidst these escalations and the idea of retaliation in Yemen, a surprise development occurred just hours after the attack in Sana'a airport on May 6th, when U.S. President Trump suddenly announced that an agreement has been reached between the United States and the Houthis, and that the Houthis are going to stop their attacks on maritime vessels, adding that if this does indeed happen, then the United States is going to stop their attacks against the Houthis. Reports then emerged that there were intense diplomatic talks between the sides that were mediated by Oman over the last several days, and also implied that these are linked to the ongoing negotiations between the United States and Iran. Reports in Israel stated that the country was not informed about the United States' agreement with the Houthis or even the negotiations, and that officials in Israel were quote-unquote stunned at this development. Israel put out an immediate announcement stating that, quote, quiet will be met with quiet, end quote, i.e. saying if the Houthis also cease their attacks against Israel, then Israel would be willing to do the same. However, within hours, different sources within the Houthi leadership rejected Israel's call. They did confirm that an agreement has been reached with the United States, but stated that the group's attacks against Israeli targets are going to continue. The movement also put out a picture of the major ammonia tank that Israel has at the port of Haifa in northern Israel, with a big target on it, stating that this is going to be the aim of future missiles. At this point, it's unclear what exactly the deal between the United States and the Houthis includes. However, it appears to be limited to the fighting between those two entities alone and to not include any ceasefire with Israel. President Trump was later asked what happens if the Houthis continue to attack Israel, and he said he'll debate that if and when that happens. As a general note, I'm going to say that intelligence in Israel has estimated that the Houthis have several dozen missiles left in their arsenals. However, that they also manufacture several missiles each week in underground facilities. Some of these facilities were attacked by the United States in recent months. However, some of them still remain. Those are my highlights on the recent developments in the Israel-Hamas War. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone who might be interested in updates on the war. Hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications if you want to know when they come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.